Okay, hello and welcome to Lunchtime Looks. My name is Kendall. I'm a program assistant here, filling in for Dr. Harris. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here and to introduce Dr. Angela Uriyo, who is an assistant professor of fashion design and merchandising at WVU, and this year's faculty fellow who co-curated this exhibit, Material Matters: Use, Form, and Meaning in African and Diasporic Art. The Faculty Fellowship Program was created by Dr. Harris, our Curator of Education, in 2023 as a way to foster interdisciplinary exhibitions at the Art Museum. The application for next year's Faculty Fellowship Program just opened up and closes on April 2nd. So for any faculty who are interested, you still have time to apply, but you might want to get started on your application. And then to return to Dr. Uriyo, with degrees in clothing and textiles, apparel product design, and a doctorate in human environmental sciences, with an emphasis in textile and apparel management, Dr. Uriyo has a diverse and unique knowledge of textiles and fiber arts. She's been a wonderful collaborator, and the museum staff have been really excited to work with her in putting together this exhibit, and to show off some of these pieces in our collection and make these really great connections between African and diasporic art. So with that, I think we're all very excited to hear from you, and I will let you take it away.
Thank you, Kendall. As she said, my name is Angela Uriyo, and I'm an assistant professor in fashion design and merchandising. The title of my talk today is Sharif Bey and the Power of the Kiwi Bird. So when I was thinking about the object that I would focus on in this talk, I don't really have a favorite object. I liked every one of the objects in this exhibition, but I do have a favorite section, and it is this section on ritual assemblage. Okay, just the idea that material objects can carry energy, and that energy can be converted or I would say converted or transformed into healing, protective, and even have spiritual implications is something that is really fascinating to me. I wanted to stick to a contemporary piece, so it was between Vanessa German's piece and Sharif Bey. And after doing a little bit of research on both, I went ahead and decided to do Sharif Bey's Kiwi Bird. The reason why I chose Sharif Bey is because of his background and the fact that he uses a lot of his childhood experiences as well as memories in the trajectory of his work. And I, being a creative scholar, I focus a lot on individual and communal memory and how that can be used to transform material objects and also to depict maybe certain narratives or inherited histories or even identity. So it just made more sense to me to stick with Sharif Bey's piece because I could connect more, it resonated more with what I do. So let's learn a little bit about the ceramicist. So Sharif Bey was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, just up the road, to an African-American family. He was one of 12 children. His father was a musician, a wood carver, and also an avid museum goer, okay? His uncle, Nathaniel Bey, his father was Nathaniel Bey, his uncle was Frederick Bey, was also an artist, and he maintained an active studio even when he had retired. He was more into murals and the like. I believe that it is, through this exposure with art at an early age that he understood that art was only not a form of expression, but also a way to understand the world, to make sense of the world. When Sharif Bey was 9 years old, one of his teachers saw that he had an interest in drawing and recommended him to the Saturday art program at the Carnegie Museum of Art. Again, that program was a really formative experience for him. He says in a lot of his interviews, he was from a predominantly African-American neighborhood. His school was the same way. So this was the first time that he had exposure to from kids from different social and economic backgrounds. But something else that he learned while at the museum from instructors was the idea of how to look at art, okay? It wasn't just to respond to it in terms of, oh, it's aesthetically pleasing, or maybe, it's skillfully made. Those are all great things. But how do you respond to it, right? When you look at it, how do you respond to it? And this is something that he has asked of himself over and over the years. Shortly after arriving at the Saturday art program at the Carnegie Mellon Museum, the way that they used to run these programs, according to the interviews that I've watched of him, they used to meet their teachers or instructors, and then they would give them, the exercise for the day, the prompt for the day, and then they would let them wander through the museums. I don't know if they're still doing it today, but they are. But that would be just like a wonderful way for a child to explore art. So anyway, shortly after starting this program, he encountered an object in the museum called an inkisi. Now, if you look on the first page of your handout, that is the second figure. That is one depiction of the inkisi, okay? And I'll talk about that in just a second. Him being a 10-year-old kid, he didn't really read the museum label, but he had this sense that it was otherworldly, okay? At first glance, if you look at it, it might feel like it depicts violence because you see all these nails in it that have been inserted in it, or sharp blades, or maybe it's some kind of destruction. But for him, he sensed that something else was happening with this piece, that the object clearly had some kind of power and purpose. And that is what fascinated him about it. He later recalled that the figure didn't feel like it was an inanimate object or an inert sculpture. It felt like it was actually alive, and that it maybe operated between the boundary of that which was visible and that which was not visible to us, okay? So the inkisi was not simply a piece of art, but it is actually an interface between human communities and spiritual forces. I believe that early encounter stayed with him throughout the decades, and we'll get to that when we talk about his piece here. But first of all, let's talk about what an inkisi is, okay? I think that's important to kind of define before we get into the kiwi bird itself. So on your handout, I have the first figure on that handout is a figure of the Congo region where the Bakongo people live in Africa. It's partially in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Angola, okay? There isn't a perfect translation for the word Nkisi in English. When the first Europeans went there and saw it, they thought it looked a little bit like a fetish, an object that people would obsess about and maybe worship because it had magical powers. And so they disregarded it as anything significant, and eventually, outlawed Africans or the Bakongo from using it in their practices. But in the Bakongo, among the Bakongo, Nkisi is not simply a spiritual or ritual tool. It is a personalized force from the invisible realm, really the world of the ancestors. The way that an Nkisi becomes or is made, somebody in the community dies, okay? They pass on into the world of the ancestors. Then from there, they may come back to somebody who's still living and somebody who's still alive, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Somebody who's still living, and then give them instructions in terms of how to carve the object, and more specifically, the ritual that must go along with it in order for it to actually take effect. Okay, so this is how these figurines or these cultural objects come into being. It's not something that, you and I one day could wake up and say, okay, let's go have that carved. It's actually by revelation from the spirit world. The carved figure that we see in many museums, such as the one that you see on your handout, is only a vessel, okay? And it only really becomes activated once you have all the ecosystem that goes along with it, which is the songs, the gestures, the ritual space, as well as the medicinal substances that are either inserted in it. Okay, if you look on it, there's almost like a square box in around the abdomen area, or even hanging on it, tied and hanging on it in bundles, similar to what you see on Vanessa German's piece right next to me. Also included in that is the diviner, okay, the person who got that revelation for this specific Nkisi, and the one who was responsible for directing and assembling the Nkisi. The last part of this equation are the community members who seek help from the Nkisi. So it doesn't exist in a vacuum. All these components make up what the Nkisi is and how you activate it. So in order to activate these figures, these power figures, the first thing that you would do, is, of course, if you're a community member, you would approach the diviner and tell them your issue. They would seek counsel from, the spirit with which gave them the unction to create the Nkisi, and they would have instructions as to what medicinal compounds to put together, to insert within the Nkisi in order for whatever petition the community member had to take effect. Now, those medicinal materials sometimes are made from clay, sometimes seeds, plant matter, animal parts, iron, soil, from places like grave sites or even crossroads. Each of these materials that are used carry specific meanings, such as speed, clarity, endurance, yeah, I think that's what I want to. I'll stop right there with the meanings. So once the medicinal substances have been created and placed within the Nkisi, then comes where you actually insert a nail into the Nkisi, right? That nail is indicative of almost like a signed contract, like, it bears witness to maybe an oath you have made, maybe it is you have a resolution to a dispute that you have had, or maybe a pursuit for justice. But over time, it becomes almost like a community archive of all, the moments that the community has approached the Nkisi and, what petitions that they have had of the Nkisi. So all those hundreds or dozens of nails that you see on the Nkisi, these are individual petitions, or I almost want to call them contracts that people have made, between them and the Nkisi, so the Nkisi to actually function. So with that in mind, the idea that the Nkisi is actually a container or a vessel of power, that is what captured the imagination of the young artist Sharif Bey. So years later, it would lead him to create works like the sculpture you see here. But how did that young boy who was in that Saturday art program at the Carnegie Mellon Museum become this world-renowned, ceramicist? Well, I'm glad you asked, because at the age of 14, he was selected to attend the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, which is a Pittsburgh-based, minority-led art and learning center. There he focused on ceramics, and he had a lot of exposure to world-renowned ceramicists who would come there to exhibit their work, run workshops. And he stayed there, and he said he never left, but obviously he did leave. But he stayed there until he went off to college. He did get his BFA in ceramics, his MFA in studio art, and his PhD later on in art education. Today, he is an associate professor of art at Syracuse University. But as you can see, he is still very, very much of an active ceramicist as well. What I can say is that he has often said that seeing that object in the museum all those years ago has sparked a lifelong curiosity about how objects hold meaning and power. So let's talk about the kiwi bird, which is the object of our attention today. The kiwi bird is made from earthenware. And having done some research on earthenware, I wondered why did he use earthenware over other substances? And it's because it doesn't shrink too much in the firing process. He inserts, either if it's shards of clay, ceramic shards or nails, he inserts them into the vessel before the firing process. And it being earthenware, it doesn't compromise the structure of the actual vessel. The shards read like feathers, okay? And on top of the kiwi bird is a head that acts like a cap or a stopper. So it actually, I'm not sure if, I haven't tried it. I don't know if Kendall, if you have, if it actually, it probably does. It comes out, right? Yeah. It does come out, wonderful. Okay, and what you can see about this cap or stopper is that it has a kiwi bird's head, but it has beaks facing both ways and a large eye, which shows that it's not only looking to the past, but also to the future, okay? What is also interesting about these shards is, depending on how the light falls on it, there is a rhythm that is created by it in very unpredictable ways. Some of the edges, as you can see, are sharp, while others are not as sharp. The other thing that I found really interesting about this piece is that the shards are actually pointing inwards, right? A lot of them look like they were sharp, they had like a sharp point, but that point has been inserted. So similar to what you see on the inkisi. These are nails that have been driven in. I was thinking like if as an artist, if I was trying to depict feathers, I would probably do it the other way. But again, you can see the influence of the inkisi, again, coming out in that sense. So the repetition of these shards gives this small piece, that sort of dense texture that gives the object both weight and visual movement. It almost feels like I don't know, it has this like energy that has been built into it. The kiwi bird, when I looked at it and kept researching it, I wondered why would he use a bird, right? Why a bird? Why a kiwi bird? Because I hadn't seen it anywhere else. But I realized that it, again, went back to his childhood. The Carnegie Museum of Art has over, I think, 140,000 pieces of bird specimen. And, between skeletons, eggs, and taxidermy, at some point he must have been exposed to exhibits or even the collections themselves. And if you look on the last page of your handout, you will see one of his most recent pieces being depicted. Okay, again, these are birds that are being depicted. But the kiwi bird has its own symbolic weight. For the Maori communities in New Zealand, the kiwi is a treasured creature. It's nocturnal, it's flightless, but it's also associated with humility, resilience, and a deep connection to the land. Bay seems to draw on that symbolic language while also reshaping it through his own lens, okay? So that was my interpretation of why he chose the kiwi bird. It is something that he is interested in for that purpose. At the same time, when I look at the feathers, if you look at the little label that we wrote for this piece, these are discarded ceramic shards that reference the industrial history of Syracuse, New York, where Bay lives and works. Syracuse was once a major hub of ceramic manufacturing, and so the broken industrial pottery becomes the bird's plumage, connecting natural symbolism to local labor and industry. That is something that I found Bay talking about a lot in his work. If a piece breaks, it's not a big deal. He'll just put it into a new piece, which I think is really, really kind of novel, like just reusing his pieces, even if they've been broken. He also talks about the fact that when he was younger and made little ceramic pieces for family, if they broke, he has taken them and reinserted them into new work. So that is something that I, as a creative, will definitely consider, because there's a lot of things that we start, we finish, we don't like, but then what do you do with that? So finally, what makes kiwi bird so compelling is that it operates on several levels at once. It is playful, slightly quirky, and again, but it is also conceptually rich. Bay transforms fragments of industrial waste into something that feels ceremonial and almost sacred. In doing so, he bridges several worlds: African spiritual traditions, contemporary ceramics, museum history, and local industry. The result is an object that feels both ancient and contemporary. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That was really fascinating talk about Sharif Bay and some of these connections. And it's always great to have the perspective of one of the exhibition curators who've put so much thought into arranging and selecting the pieces that go into these exhibits. So we have some time now for question and answers. Since we are recording, I'll bring the microphone to you, and we ask that you speak into that just so it gets picked up by the camera. So does anybody have any questions to start off?
Where did you start when you started curating everything? Like, what got the ball rolling for you?
In terms of selecting pieces, or?
Yeah.
Well, I think the first meeting that we had, I know the first meeting that we had, both my co-curators, Sam, they took me to the vault, where everything is stored. And they started showing me, because my proposal was African diasporic art. So they started showing me the pieces that were available to me and making some recommendations. So that's where we started. I think we did that 2 or 3 times. And then the whittling process, okay, so what are you actually going to use? And then from there, how are we going to categorize this so that this makes sense? Because for me, it was a lot of pieces, but then I like to put things in boxes so that it's logical and it has some kind of flow. Once I did that, then it's labels. Like all these labels that you see took a long time to do. Yeah, that's what we did all summer. It was, we met probably every 2 weeks. Spent a lot of time in the vault looking at all the artwork that they had. What I know is that we wanted to keep it with the collection that was here at the Art Museum. So that's what we worked with. And as you can see, there are a lot of pieces, but there were a lot of other pieces too that didn't make it in, because at some point you have to consider the space that you have. Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
I'm just curious, I'm a student at WVU and I work here. What was a part of that editing process for cutting out pieces from the show? And kind of like what made it in and why?
Oh. That's a great question. Let me just remember back. I would say that once I started having like an idea of like the big, like the sections, because once I had the pieces, I'm like, okay, so what makes sense given my theme, right? Because I had to have a theme before even selecting anything, right? So what made sense given the theme, create the sections, and then start like dropping, different artworks or different cultural works into those categories. But in terms of what didn't make it in, what I can say, I'm not sure a lot didn't make it in, because when we were picking out, I was also editing in that process. It wasn't just like, they would show it to me like, okay, some of the textiles I know did not make it in because I didn't feel like they jived with the palette that was currently with the other textiles, because I am a fashion design person and color palette and unity is a big deal. So the textiles that were really colorful and didn't have any sort of connection to the other ones did not make it in, I can tell you that. The other pieces that were kind of like question marks were these two right here by an Ethiopian artist, just because they have that sort of the history behind the piece. But again, as I told Bob, this is part of African history. So whether we like it or not, it should be in the show. Okay? Yeah.
Part of what I really like in some works is how they, if they make you uncomfortable, and for what reasons exactly, and that definitely did make me kind of pause and wait for a minute. It's actually my favorite piece of the show,
Oh.
from the photograph in the back. So I'm glad you included it.
Good.
I was curious how you will get your students to come and learn from your vast knowledge. There's so much to learn here.
There is. Thank you for that question. Actually, the students, part of the fellowship is that you have to have a student, you have to incorporate it into one of your classes. And I've done that in my one of my pattern making classes. So my students came here probably a month ago, and they were given a tour, and from there they have to pick a section, and that be the inspiration for their design work. So the tour was, I think it lasted like an hour, and after that they spent probably another 30 minutes just sitting in the space, drawing, taking photographs, writing, just kind of being immersed in the environment. It wasn't easy, I'm going to tell you that. A lot of students were like, what? This is new. This is new to a lot of them. They haven't been exposed to this. But after you calm them down and tell them, listen, it's not cultural appropriation. If you are inspired, you just state the inspiration, right? I, as an African, use Western influences all the time, but I know that I state my inspiration. And it's okay to be, informed and exposed to new things. This is what travel does to you.
I'm wondering if it was it a challenge or was it exciting to like bring some artifacts that were never designed to be in a Western art museum next to artists like Vanessa German that are inspired by those things, but thinking about these things in a new and different way?
That is a great question. During the summer, I read so many articles about museum curatorial practices, and the controversies behind, especially like displaying work that was not meant for the public, things that are supposed to be sacred objects, right? Even the Nkisi itself, that's a sacred object that you wouldn't see unless you needed help from it, right? But something that I have realized is that instead of putting a blank space, I'm just putting a label and saying this is what this is, and and describing the physical part of it. If these things are not there, you will never see them. The Nkisi, some of us have never even heard of them until we see them at the museum, even though they're part of our culture, right? So there's a place for it. As long as it's done in a respectful way, I am okay with it. Yeah. But I do acknowledge, I mean, what you said is very true. Some of these objects are not meant for public consumption, but here we are. Mm-hmm.
Will you make available your student projects and their responses? Because that would be so interesting for us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for asking that question. So we have a fashion show, May 7th. Colleen is my colleague, and her class is also using the, some of the objects from this exhibit as inspiration. So May 7th at the CAC, there will be a fashion show. It is already up on the CCAM website, right? It's already up there. So if there are any issues, you can email me, But yes, please come. You will definitely see some work there. And they're already designing. The designing started probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. It is challenging, but you keep pushing. Yeah, keep pushing.
Somebody else. Go ahead.
I just wanted to, thank you. I don't know the question exactly, but I'm so struck by these beaded sex coverings in the back. And I wanted to say I value not showing them with photographs of people wearing them, that I see them as textures and objects as a result of the way you have presented them. Mm-hmm. And did you consider that, or the materials they're made of in particular, or what was your plan with that?
So funnily enough, we had wanted to, because I'm not sure everybody has like the imagination to understand exactly how they would be worn. Some of them are a little bit more abstract. So we wanted to place at least one of them on a form, but it didn't fit the form, right? So we just scrapped that idea. When I was in DC in the summer, I went to the, I think the Museum of the African Diaspora, I don't know if it's the African, where is, wait, can you help, which museum is it up there? Not the big one, but the smaller, is it the Museum of African Art in DC? Yes. Yeah, that would be the one. And I saw they had all kinds of texts that you could sit with and do research, and that's how I did some of my research. And they did have a photograph of one of these, cash sex pieces. And I was like, oh, so that's how it's worn. So, because it's not intuitive. Not all of them, it's not intuitive. I mean, we know that these are modesty shields, right? But how are they worn? So I did consider, I was like, do I need to put a photograph in place so that people can see? But with the issue of nudity, again, because we have young kids in here as well, even though we have, on the other side of this wall, there is a picture of a woman, that didn't work itself out. And maybe that's a good thing. Yeah, but that's a great question. It was, I just hope that people are able to understand how these would be worn, and if not, maybe do some of their own research to figure that out. Yeah.
Now, this is a collaborative question in the vein of collaboration. Thinking about, everything that you've learned, that you've picked up, how's that going to kind of impact your designs? Is there?
Oh, okay. I think for me, with design, the ideas always start like months and months and months ago. I'm always like iterating. It starts one way, it kind of changes, but when I started working here in the summer on this exhibit, I just knew that I needed to do something that had this kind of volume and texture. So I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about, how I can incorporate that into a design without it being literal, How do you do that? And I guess that's the question I also ask my students. How can you make your garment, if you're in the assemblage section, how are you incorporating that in some way? And that takes thought. So yes, it does. I see a lot of inspiration here.
Any other questions? All right. So thank you all for those great questions. And of course, thank you, Dr. Uriyo, for an amazing presentation and this excellent exhibition that you've helped curate.
Thank you.
And I hope you all will join us again next month. Oh, yes. Yes, yeah. So we have our next Lunchtime Looks on April 10th with Dr. Katie Jones, who will be speaking upstairs in our softcover exhibition. And like I mentioned, the Faculty Fellowship application for next year is open, and that application closes on April 2nd. And with that, I hope you all join me in another round of applause for Dr. Uriyo.